When Harris's team finally reached the ridge, the snow had swallowed nearly everything, except that one tent. Torn open from the inside, burned black around the seams, and inside, the temperature was warmer than the mountain air. Cameras half melted, gear frozen mid-motion, as if time itself had snapped in half. Then came the signal, a weak pulse from beneath the ice. Harris followed it into a tunnel no one had ever mapped, and what he found wasn't human. The walls glowed, humming softly, and in the center stood a frame of light, flickering like a doorway. Just before everything went white, they heard voices. Human voices, whispering from inside the light. And that's when Harris realized the missing climbers were never lost. They were still in there. Before we go any further, if this is your first time here, we'd love for you to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. Your support means the world and helps us bring you even more powerful stories. Stick with us until the end, and if this mystery moves you, share your thoughts in the comments and pass it along to a friend. The air on Mount Grayson never felt like normal air. It was sharp, almost metallic, the kind that stung your lungs with every breath. Elias Kane stood at the base of the ridge, staring up into the kind of sky that made you second-guess every decision leading to this moment. 10 climbers in total, men and women from different corners of the world. Some veterans, some first-timers hungry for that feeling of being above the clouds. Their laughter mixed with the sound of clanging metal and snapping rope as they checked gear, fixed buckles, and loaded supplies into the sleds. The mountain loomed above them, silent and indifferent, swallowing their noise in seconds. "Man, you really think we can pull this off?" someone asked behind Elias. He smiled, adjusting the strap on his pack. "If we don't, at least we'll make the news." They laughed, but it was nervous laughter. The kind you share before stepping into something you know you can't fully control. Locals had gathered near the outpost that morning, watching them prepare. 2 old men, leaning on their canes, whispered as the climbers passed. "Every few winters someone thinks they can conquer her," one said. The other replied quietly, "They never come back the same, if they come back at all." Elias pretended not to hear, but he did. He always did. The mountain had a history, a quiet legend locals called the Whispering Zone. A stretch of white wilderness where compasses spun, radios died, and the wind carried voices that didn't belong to the living. But to climbers like Elias, legends were just challenges dressed in mystery. By noon, the first leg began. Snow crunched under boots, the horizon disappearing in waves of white fog. Breath turned into small ghosts, floating away into nothing. Every few minutes, someone would stop to tighten a strap or shake off the cold. They joked about bad coffee, about how their fingers were already going numb, about Elias's obsession with filming everything. He carried a small camcorder strapped to his chest, not the newest model but reliable. Each night, he documented their journey. Progress, coordinates, weather, morale. In the first video log, he smiled at the lens, his voice low and steady. Day 1. Spirits are high. Weather's holding. The summit's about 5 days out, maybe less if the wind favors us. He panned the camera toward the others, waving, laughing, tossing snow at the lens. For a moment, it looked like any normal trip. Just people chasing something bigger than themselves. But on the third night, things changed. The temperature dropped faster than predicted. A storm rolled in, heavy snow, relentless wind. The team set camp early, building a windbreak with gear and snow blocks. Inside the tent, the mood was different. No jokes, no laughter. Just the slow drip of melting ice and the hiss of the portable stove. Someone whispered, "You hear that?" The group froze. Outside, the wind howled, but beneath it, something faint, something rhythmic. Like humming. A woman's voice maybe. Soft, drawn out, repeating something none of them could make out. Elias turned off the stove. The sound stopped. He switched on the radio, static. Nothing else. They dismissed it. Fatigue, maybe? The altitude playing tricks on them. But later, in his next video entry, Elias looked uneasy. Day 3. Wind's picking up again. We thought we heard something out there. Probably just echo, right? Anyway, we're moving early tomorrow. The next morning, one of the climbers, a man named Pavel, claimed he heard footsteps outside the tent during the night. Not animal, not random crunches. Human-like steps circling the camp. Everyone brushed it off. They were exhausted, half frozen, probably hearing their own hearts beating in their ears. Still, Elias noticed the way no one slept soundly that night. By the 5th day, they'd reached the edge of the Whispering Zone. The GPS started glitching, flickering between coordinates that didn't make sense. Radios buzzed and died. Every compass needle trembled, refusing to settle. The world around them grew quieter. Even the wind sounded heavier, slower, almost like it was breathing. Elias set up his camera again, this time capturing the horizon, endless white, broken only by the jagged silhouette of the summit. He whispered, almost to himself, "We're close now. The air feels strange, thicker somehow. But we'll keep pushing." That night, they found strange indentations near the camp, wide, uneven, like something had dragged across the snow. No one could tell what made them. They stretched for meters, curving toward the ridge, and then vanished under the frost. A small argument broke out between two of the climbers. One wanted to turn back. Another said they'd come too far. Elias tried to calm them, his voice steady but strained. "We'll make it. Just one more push in the morning." Before dawn, he filmed his last clear entry. "The wind sounds like voices tonight. I can't explain it, but it feels like it's calling to us." He laughs softly in the video, but his eyes say something else. Fear, maybe, or disbelief. The next morning, the snowstorm returned. Whiteout conditions swallowed everything. The last transmission from Elias's team came at 2:43 a.m., a simple SOS ping that faded into static before anyone could respond. After that, silence. No coordinates, no signal. 10 climbers gone. The mountain stood still, indifferent as always. And by the time rescue teams arrived, all that was left were faint tracks leading nowhere, and the echo of a voice carried by the wind, whispering something no one could understand. When the world finally realized Elias Kane's team had gone silent, it was already too late. 48 hours had passed before the first distress calls reached the Mount Grayson Ranger's office. By then, the wind had wiped every trace of them clean. Search parties moved in the following morning. Teams of seasoned rescuers, snowmobiles, dogs, drones. They found fragments of gear scattered like breadcrumbs, a glove half buried in ice, a torn map pressed into a drift, and one of the team's solar lamps still faintly blinking. But there were no footprints, no sign of struggle, no blood, just a perfect, unsettling calm. One ranger, a man named Donovan, said later, "It was like they just stepped out of existence." Elias's family arrived within the week. His sister Mara, wrapped in a black coat, standing by the ranger hut as journalists swarmed. Cameras flashed, microphones pushed close. Everyone wanted the same thing, answers. But no one had any. She told one reporter, her voice cracking, he wasn't reckless. He planned everything. Elias never just disappeared. Inside the command tent, investigators reviewed GPS data. The route stopped abruptly at 2:43 a.m., the same time as the final SOS ping. The coordinates pointed to a spot near the ridge, an area known for crevasses and sudden avalanches. Rescuers combed through it for weeks, but the only thing they uncovered were deep claw-like gouges on a rock wall, as if something had tried to dig its way out or in. Donovan couldn't shake that image. At night, when the searchlights went out, he'd swear the wind carried whispers, syllables shaped almost like words. He told no one. No one wanted to hear it. After a month, the official report came. Presumed dead, cause undetermined, but among the locals, that answer didn't stick. Rumors began to twist through the small town at the base of the mountain. At the diner near the station, 2 men whispered over their coffee. "Same thing that happened in '87, remember?" one muttered. "Yeah," said the other, leaning close. "Those hikers too. No bodies. Just gear. And the screams during storms." Their voices dropped lower as a waitress passed by, pretending not to listen. They said the mountain didn't take lives by accident. It kept them. Meanwhile, YouTube conspiracy videos flooded the internet. Footage of the rescue site, blurry drone clips of ice caves, wild theories about magnetic anomalies, military cover-ups, even alien abduction. Elias's name became a headline instead of a person. Mara stayed in town for weeks, refusing to leave. Every day she'd walk up to the ranger station, asking if there was anything new. Each time, Donovan would shake his head. One evening, as the sun dipped below the snow line, Mara heard something strange. Faint, rhythmic clicks from one of the station's old radio receivers. The device hadn't worked in months, but the static almost formed a pattern, like tapping fingers. When she called Donovan over, it stopped. He wrote it off as interference, but the look in her eyes said she didn't believe him. As winter returned, so did the storms. Locals swore that during heavy snowfalls, voices echoed down from the slopes. 10 voices, overlapping, calling out faintly through the wind. Some said they heard laughter. Others claimed it was screaming. No one dared to climb again. By the 16th month, Mount Grayson had gone completely silent again. Tourism died. The ranger huts stood empty except for Donovan, who still did his patrols, walking through the snow with a radio that rarely spoke back. He started talking to the mountain, out loud sometimes, just to break the silence. "You can stop now," he'd mutter. "They're gone. You can let it go." But the wind always answered differently, a hollow hum that seemed to curl around his words and toss them back. Then, in April of the following year, 17 months after the disappearance, a new expedition arrived. Not climbers this time, but hikers chasing ghost stories. 3 of them, young, curious, naive. They set up camp far below the summit, recording their own journey for fun. That's when one of them noticed something strange on the thermal camera, a square-shaped mass half buried in the ice, glowing faintly. When they reached it, the snow crunched hollow beneath their feet. Someone brushed away a layer of frost, revealing faded fabric. A zipper, then a logo, the same emblem seen in photos of Elias Kane's tent. One of the hikers whispered, "Holy hell, that's them." And just like that, the silence was broken again. The storm had passed by dawn. What was left behind felt untouched by time, an ocean of white silence. The 3 hikers, breath-fogging in the freezing air, stared down at the shape half buried beneath their boots. The tent was unlike anything they'd ever seen. The canvas had frozen solid, preserved under 17 months of ice. It shouldn't have survived, not at that altitude, not in that weather. And yet, it was there, perfectly sealed, as though someone had just zipped it up and walked away. They circled it slowly. No tracks, no signs of collapse or tearing, just a faint scorch mark spreading from the center of the fabric, almost invisible unless the sun hit it at an angle. The mark looked like a handprint, 5 fingers pressed from the inside, dark and charred, as though something had burned through without smoke or flame. One of the hikers, Nate, took out his phone and whispered, "You're getting this, right?" His friend, Aaliyah, nodded shakily, the camera trembling in her grip. Yeah, I'm getting it." They unzipped the entrance slowly, half expecting bones or gear, or nothing at all. Instead, they found everything. Sleeping bags still laid out. Half-eaten food packets. A small notebook open on one page, the ink blurred from condensation. And resting on top of a sleeping pad, a camcorder, coated in a thin film of frost. It was still intact. The battery long dead, but the body uncracked, untouched. Nate exhaled, his voice barely above a whisper. This is Elias Kane's team. They didn't stay long. No one spoke of the handprint again. Not out loud, anyway. They packed the items carefully, tagged the coordinates, and descended the mountain before nightfall. By the time they reached the ranger station, Donovan's name had already been called back into duty. When he saw the tent again, he just stood there. Didn't say a word. His breath caught somewhere between disbelief and guilt. He reached out, touched the frozen canvas, and flinched as if it were hot. Mara arrived the next day. Her eyes were hollow, but when she saw the camcorder, something flickered. Hope, fear, maybe both. She held it like it was alive, her gloved fingers tracing the initials EK scratched into the plastic. The investigation restarted in full force. Teams from the Mountaineering Authority, forensic analysts, even a few journalists who'd never let the story go. They examined everything. The tent stitching, the chemical composition of the burn, the layout of supplies. Every detail pointed to something bizarre. The items showed no signs of long-term decay. Even the open food packets were still soft, not frozen solid. It was as if time had simply stopped inside. Forensics couldn't explain it. Temperature preservation? Maybe. But 17 months? Impossible. Inside the notebook, Elias's last entry stopped mid-sentence. Weather stable, morale uncertain. Wind sounds off again, almost like the line cut there. No punctuation, no signature. But the strangest part wasn't the writing. It was the faint, circular ring on the paper, like a teardrop that had never fully dried. Word spread faster than wildfire. News vans lined the snowbanks. Locals gathered again at the diner, whispering theories. One woman swore her grandfather told stories of a thin place on Grayson, a spot where the air folds in on itself, where the living can hear the dead. Another man claimed he'd seen lights near the summit weeks before the hikers' discovery, flickering blue lights that moved too slowly to be lightning. Donovan tried to ignore the talk, but the more he listened, the more he felt the weight return. He'd spent months telling himself the mountain was just a mountain. But now, with that tent sitting less than 50 feet away from him, sealed evidence tagged and logged, he wasn't sure anymore. Late one night, he sat alone in the station's observation room, staring at the camcorder. Its small red light blinked faintly after being charged. He hesitated, thumb hovering over the playback button. Outside, the wind began to rise again, tapping against the windows like fingernails. He hit play. Static. A flash of Elias's face. Then a brief clip of the team laughing, shouting into the snow, voices distorted by distance. Normal. Ordinary. Human. But then the image cut, and the audio warped, a low, humming tone beneath their laughter, like someone whispering a word too deep to be understood. Donovan's pulse quickened. He leaned closer to the screen, watching Elias turn the camera toward the horizon. The frame blurred, then focused again, the shape of the summit, and beyond it, something moving. Not an animal, not wind, not shadow, just motion, tall and slow, bending the snow as it passed. Then, nothing. Video ended abruptly. Donovan sat there in silence, the camcorder still humming softly, the red light now steady instead of blinking. He couldn't tell if it was a malfunction or something else. When he looked outside again, the storm had started to rise, thick sheets of white swallowing the mountain's outline, just as they had 17 months ago. Somewhere inside that wind, he thought he heard it again. That faint, rhythmic hum, like voices calling names that didn't belong to the living anymore. They brought the files into a quiet room like it was a body. Careful hands, hushed voices, the clinical light making everyone look thinner, more tired. Elias's camcorder sat on the table, a small, battered thing that had seen more winters than any of them. Mara watched with fingers folded so tight her knuckles went white. Donovan stood beside her, one shoulder grazing hers, the faintest of support. No one spoke. The first clips were ordinary. Setting camp, joking about frostbite, someone muttering about bad instant coffee. You can almost feel the warmth of it. Through the speakers, laugh lines, the breath that fogs and disappears. It's human, close, comforting. For a moment, the room exhaled. Then the footage thinned. A clip showed Elias alone, camera balanced on his knee, speaking softly. His voice was low, steady, tired. We're not alone. It's not the mountain. It's what's under it. He said it like someone naming a pain. Not dramatic, not for effect, just honest, quiet. Like a man admitting he'd been wrong about something he once believed in, absolutely. After that, patterns began to glitch. Frames jumped, audio bent. The video stuttered at the edges like frost on glass. Investigators recorded every anomaly, timestamps, frame numbers, audio spectrograms. They treated it like evidence because, in a way, it was. At first, corruption looked technical. Files ended mid-clip, then resumed with seconds missing. Some frames were smeared, the pixels twisting into long vertical shadows. Other segments replayed in reverse, the movements pulled backward like someone rewinding a film tape. An audio tech, bored and brilliant, ran filters and found frequencies that shouldn't exist, layers beneath the human voice, tones that swept under speech and hummed like a throat made of wind. He called them subharmonics, but that name felt clinical next to what the others heard. Names, sometimes, whispered beneath the hum. They tried to transcribe. They slowed the audio to half speed. They stretched it, compressed it, fed it through every cleanup program they had. Still, every clear phrase slipped away like ice under a boot. Between those corrupted textures, there were moments of terrifying clarity. A clip, 3 minutes maybe, showed the team inside the tent at night, faces lit by the stove's orange glow, breath slow, shoulders heavy with cold. Someone cracked a joke, a lighter flared. Then, almost imperceptibly, the light shifted. The air in the frame darkened, like someone pulling a curtain across the lens. One climber reached out, hand moving toward the tent wall, as if feeling for something. His fingertips left no mark. He pulled back, whispering a word that none of the techs could catch. Later, Elias whispers into the camera. His breath fogs the lens. He sounds small. It's like it watches like a room with no windows. You hear him breathe, heavy. You feel him thinking. The camera captures the hush that follows the micro-movements. A sleeve tugged, a strap adjusted, a blink, and then the voices begin. Not all at once. Not like a choir. More like a slow pressing. A syllable here, a name there. Overlapping, layering. The technicians wrote down what they could make out. Mara, Elias, Pavel. 10 names. Distorted, stretched, repeated until they looped like a chorus of lost answers. Every playback corrupted a little more. Files that had been smooth 1 minute showed additional artifacts the next. Hard drives registered a rise in temperature when certain clips were played, inexplicably. Forensic analysts frowned over readouts that suggested heat where there shouldn't have been any, like the recordings themselves were generating warmth internal to the media. It made no sense. Computers don't get hot from sound. Journalists who watched the footage left the building pale, hands trembling with adrenaline. In the lobby, 2 cameramen argued in low voices. "Maybe it's a hoax," one said, rubbing his jaw. "Or maybe it's a natural phenomenon we don't understand," the other replied, eyes wide. Either way, wow. Outside, the town pulsed with gossip. At the diner, a woman leaned close to a man at the counter. "You saw Elias's sister on the news?" she whispered. She looked like she'd aged 10 years. The man sipped his coffee and shrugged. "Mount's weird, that's all. People read their own fears into it." But the footage didn't feel like fear put on. It was the opposite. The footage felt like truth, stubborn and raw. Every crack and glitch was a scar. Maura, after watching for the 9th time, did something that surprised everyone. She sat and rewound the same clip until the audio warped. Then she placed her palm against the screen, as if trying to reach Elias through the static. Her hand trembled. She mouthed a word, a name, and when she spoke, the room heard it. Soft, deliberate, breaking the hush. "They were calling each other," she said finally. "Not to the mountain, to something else. They called like people calling friends, like they thought it was a person." Donovan's eyes fixed on a frame where a shadow moved along the ridge outside the tent. It was long and slow, bending the snow in a way wind never did. He saw it, then watched it again, slower, frame by frame. He told himself it was a trick of light, a phantom. But it kept returning in the footage, a presence at the edge of vision, patient, not frantic. Experts debated in sterile rooms. Some said electromagnetic interference from underground mineral deposits could explain the distortions. Others argued for psychogenic effects, that high altitude and stress could create shared hallucinations. A few older locals suggested something older still, a theft of time, a thin place where boundaries fray. None of the explanations fit every detail. None of them accounted for the handprint on the tent, burned from the inside, with no source of external heat. As nights lengthened, the footage took on legend. People watched in groups, eyes wide in the blue glow of their screens. Some claimed to hear new sounds afterward, a ringing in the ears like a backwards song. Others swore their phones flickered when certain clips played. The more the clips were examined, the more they seemed to resist being pinned down. They weren't just footage. They were a thing that pushed back. At the end of one viewing, with the playback room nearly empty, Donovan stood and walked to the window. Outside, snow fell soft and steady, each flake a whisper. He listened to nothing, then to something, a faint pattern in the wind, patient and repetitive. He turned back slowly, back to the camcorder on the table, its small red light now off, its casing cool. Maura didn't leave that night. She sat with a mug of tea, fingers wrapped around the warmth, and said aloud, to no one in particular, "We need to know what's down there." Her voice didn't carry bravado, just a steady, stubborn ache. They all did. But whatever had reached through the screen, whatever had left its mark on the tent and the files, was patient. It waited, not for a reaction, not for fear, just time. And as the wind rose again, across a mountain that refused to be ordinary, a new, quieter dread settled over everyone who had watched the footage. Because for the first time, the camera did something no human ever does. It stopped pretending the world made sense. The path led down into the dark belly of the mountain, a fissure so tight, the air itself felt like it resisted their entry. The flashlight beams cut through the misty vapor hanging low, and with each step, the echo of their boots came back distorted, like something else was breathing with them. Harris led the way, gripping the rope line with both hands. "Stay close," he whispered, his voice cracking against the walls. No one responded. The silence was oppressive, heavy, alive, as if it were listening. The deeper they went, the more unnatural it felt. The walls shimmered faintly, slick with a frost that pulsed faintly under the light. Not reflection, more like movement. Then, finally, they reached it. At the end of the narrow tunnel, the space opened into a circular chamber. Vast, smooth, carved with geometric precision no human hand could have shaped. The walls glowed faintly white, like snow under a full moon. In the center stood a metallic frame, square and hollow, about 7 feet tall. Inside that frame floated nothing. No reflection. No shadow. Just an absence. Harris stepped forward, his breath fogging in the cold air. "This is it," he murmured. "This is what they found." Holloway crouched near the base of the structure. The floor beneath it was dusted with something black. Ash, fine as soot. "You think this is where they—" He couldn't finish. "Where they vanished." Harris answered for him. "Maybe." A sudden hum filled the air, deep and vibrating through their bones. The temperature dropped instantly. Frost crawled up their sleeves and helmets. Their breath froze mid-air. Then came a sound, faint, distorted, like a recording played backward. Voices. Dozens of them. "Help. Cold. Still here." Mira stumbled back, clutching her headset. "Harris, I'm picking something up." Audio frequencies. Human voices. He looked toward the frame again. The darkness inside it began to move, not like smoke, but like fabric twisting underwater. Shapes flickered within. Faces. Frozen mid-scream, melting back into the void. "No," Holloway whispered. "No, that's not." The hum grew louder. The walls vibrated. Snow fell from the ceiling like ash. Then the light exploded. Everything went white. For a moment, Harris thought he was back on the ridge, wind against his face, the sun rising over the peaks. But when the white faded, he wasn't in the mountain anymore. He stood in a vast frozen plain under a violet sky. The others were there too, their suits frosted, faces pale, eyes wide. In the distance stood 10 figures, motionless, the missing climbers. They weren't breathing. They weren't aging. They were preserved, frozen mid-step, eyes open, as if the moment they vanished had been captured in glass. Mira gasped, her breath forming clouds. "It's them." One of the figures, a woman, turned her head slightly. Just slightly. Enough to prove one thing. She wasn't dead. The sound returned, low and rumbling. The frame shimmered behind them like a doorway trying to close. Harris realized the truth then. The tent, the burns, the missing gear. It wasn't an avalanche. It wasn't madness. It was this. Something inside the mountain had opened. And those climbers hadn't just disappeared. They'd been taken. He turned, shouting at the others. "Back, now, back to the tunnel." But the white light surged again, blinding. Harris's voice cut off mid-yell. When the light faded, the cavern was empty. No Harris, no Mira, no Holloway, just the rope dangling loosely into the white room, and the faint hum that never stopped. Days later, the rescue team found the cave entrance collapsed again, as if the mountain had swallowed it whole. Their equipment, left behind, was recovered near the ridge. Cameras, recorders, even the digital logs. Only one recording played properly. It was Harris's voice, faint and broken. "They didn't die out here. They crossed. And now we're following them." After that, only static. The mountain remains sealed to this day. Some nights, the locals say, when the wind cuts across the ridge, you can hear them, voices whispering through the snow, calling for help from somewhere else. And the coordinates on that map? They point to a glacier that doesn't exist anymore. Yet every satellite scan since still picks up a faint, pulsing heat, like a heartbeat, coming from deep beneath the ice. So what do you think really happened up there? Was it a natural phenomenon buried under centuries of ice, or something far beyond our understanding? If you were in Harris's boots, would you step through that light, or run for your life? Let me know what you believe in the comments, and don't forget to follow for more stories that blur the line between truth and the impossible.